Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the live stream for our exciting GH6 launch. As a regular user of Panasonic cameras, kind of exciting to talk to you all, and let's see what we've got coming up. So, first off, I want to welcome everyone to the chat. We'll make sure we can kind of get people in. It looks like we've got a few already. Let's hear where all you are coming in from. Are you coming in from my posts on Facebook? Yeah, let's hear from all of you. So, while we're doing that, I'm going to bring up the currently leaked specs that we have for the GH6 before going into the live stream. We've got about 9 minutes before the live stream begins, so let's make sure everyone can hear me okay, and we'll go from there. So if we look over at the leaks over here, let's see. Just to double check if anyone is hearing any music in the background, please do let me know. I'm playing around with this new way of kind of rebroadcasting a stream. Oh, welcome from Miami there, Cliff. Nice to, oh, from Google. Awesome. Welcome. All right, so if we look at the Panasonic lead spec so far, we are seeing, looks like it's going to be a 25 megapixel camera, so let's be excited to hear that. That's going to be quite a bit higher resolution than the GH5 a little bit, and allow the higher some ice storms that are coming through the area. So I apologize for that. If we get dropped out, note that I will try and be back ASAP. So I think we are coming back up here, so that's good. The actual live stream from Panasonic is going to be starting in about 3 minutes. So we will keep our eye on that. And if you give me 1 sec, we'll just come back over onto our leaked GH6 specs. Let's see here. So, let me see. Let me get this up for you guys. Hopefully everyone is still enjoying. What specs are each of you excited for this new camera? How about you sound off in the comments and let me know what's the most exciting thing for you? What do you think is going to change and make this camera something unique for you? All right. So let's take a peek at things while we're waiting for everyone to voice in here. Right now, we're looking at, I think some of the key features right now is the 5.7K video, at least for me. That's going to be the most exciting thing going forward because it gives a little bit of leeway around our 4K image, so a little bit of room for crop in and everything else like that. And definitely we're expecting the rolling shutter to be better. The GH5 was already an astounding camera for that. So it would be a huge boon if it gets even better, because then we're talking something that honestly looks no different than a global shutter. And that would be really nice to see. Let's see. Let me get this back up for everyone here. Give me one split sec, and we'll join up over on this side. Again, please do let me know if you guys are hearing any audio music in the background at the moment. That allows me to know if anything is coming up. So, Jeannie has an interesting point here. Mentioning, very excited to know if the old GH5 battery grip will work for the GH6. Right now, from what we are seeing on the leaks, it looks like the GH6 doesn't have the same pin port on the bottom. So I'm betting it probably won't. The real debate is actually going to be, does it even have a battery grip, I think, as an option? Are we going to see something that's kind of old Canon style of going up into the battery door? I don't think it will be, but that's definitely going to be an interesting one to find out. Fingers crossed on it being reusable. That'd be great, but I have a feeling not, especially because what we're also seeing is the grip is bigger on the GH6 than the GH5. So my bet is if there will be a grip, it will be a new one. Hate to say. Let's see here. I'm just trying to get these specs back up. And let me know if you guys are hearing anything at the moment. You shouldn't be yet. Please do let me know. Actually, no, you should be. You might not hear it yet. I'm just going to transition us over here. Let's take a peek at some of the more of the leaks. I think the biggest change is going to be that CF Express card slot. That's going to be a huge difference. We'll just kind of play things off here, and seems looks like our stream is kind of getting going. So as soon as they're kind of done their little intro here, we'll transition back over to that side. So let's see. All right, guys. Let me know if you're hearing everything properly.
Hi, I'm Frederick Van Johnson, photographer and podcaster, and the guy behind the This Week in Photo podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining this live stream. As you might imagine, today is an exciting day for the Lumix team and for creators everywhere. Since the beginning, Lumix has been a world leader in digital imaging innovation, from the introduction of the world's first digital single-lens mirrorless camera to the addition of a host of innovations.
Is everyone getting the stream okay? Let me know.
Celebrated GH
Sound off in the comments.
Today is the introduction of the brand new flagship camera in our Lumix GH line, the GH6. We've always valued the vision of filmmakers and cinematographers, just like what you watched in that introduction video. Listening to creators about their creative self-expression requirements has always been the top priority when developing Lumix cameras. And now, the Lumix team is proud to unveil the next stage in the evolution of the GH series, the GH6.
So let's see here.
The Micro Four Thirds system is already extremely well suited for video production, and GH6 will create even more creative possibilities. In short, the GH6 introduces an exciting new creative dimension featuring a broader range of creative features and mobile capabilities. Here are some of the exciting new features and capabilities of the GH6. The GH6 has adopted a new live
it is what we thought.
sensor,
25.2 megapixel image sensor, so that's true.
Has been increased by more than 20%.
The new Venus engine that we knew was going to be coming.
25.2 megapixels with higher resolution, higher speed signal readout, and wider dynamic range.
And we did know that we were going to have that 7.5 stop IBIS, so that's nice to see. That's a
image processing technology
full stop and a half improvement over the GH5.
Reproduction, as well as the rich, expressive color reproduction.
So,
The
let's just
GH6 is finally here, and we are now being joined by Matt Fraser to actually talk about it and address the questions that all of you may have in the chat. What's up, Matt?
Hey, Sean. I'm sure you haven't been very busy today. I was just lounging in the backyard. Nothing to worry about.
This has been how many years in the making for so many people in the chat. You know, just such a crazy amount of time for how long we've been waiting for this. And dude, I'm so excited that we can actually talk about this now.
Yeah, that makes two of us. Obviously, we've been sitting on a lot of information. I'm sure people have questions, and we got answers. So let's get into it. Let's get into this project and let everybody know.
So, guys, what do you think?
Yeah. So to let everybody know that is tuning in for the Q&A part of this, if you have
what do you guys think of the new settings?
We're watching on the
and the new ability
USA channel here.
What do you think of the ability to have ProRes
on the Panasonic
HQ?
Panasonic Lumix Videos channel as well. Tag either at Lumix Cameras or Panasonic Lumix Video, depending on which page you're viewing this on, so we can see.
We can definitely see that a lot of the commentary is going to be about.
So yeah, let's kind of.
We can definitely see that a lot of the commentary is going to be about autofocus. Unfortunately, I think. I know myself personally with the cameras I use, I don't actually use autofocus.
Spam the chat with the same question and the same word over and over again, you will be put in timeout because it starts to massively just fill in the thing here. So, all right, a couple of the questions that have come up so far. Obviously, everyone is asking about autofocus in the camera, so I think we do have to at least talk a little bit about the autofocus. And then
everyone talking about autofocus. I mean, are we surprised? But unfortunate.
Why don't we just get this? Yeah, let's just get this out of the way. So obviously, now that everybody sees, it uses the contrast-based autofocus system. It's DFD-based. I am well aware it's not the direction that people were hoping that we would go. So,
oh boy, this is going to be that comment, isn't it?
Videos that'll be coming out with the camera. Ultimately, they'll have to give you some guidance as to whether or not there's a meaningful improvement in the autofocus system or not. I want to make sure everybody understands why we went down the path that we did. So you have to remember that when we're developing or working on a sensor design, we're working on the information based on an older camera. You know, we're working on this around the GH4's timeline when you're working on the new sensor. And so you're working on the concerns of that sensor at that point. So low light sensitivity, dynamic range, resolution, those are the things people...
I think we can definitely, note that we are going to see sensors like this. They take time for development, just like a lot of CPUs. So they are going to be slow at transitioning. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing a number more years until they might possibly make the transition. Although some of this is excuses. Don't get me wrong.
Realistically, it has more dynamic range than a GH5 II. So you and I have been explaining to a lot of people that this is really sort of an homogenization of the GH5 II concept and the GH5 concept in a single camera body.
I think we can all agree that's going to be nice.
To the GH5. It is very competitive to the GH5 II. And so at the end of the day, when we were working on this sensor design and eventually went to incorporate it, it just wasn't possible for us to get a modification for phase-based autofocus. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that we aren't investigating phase-based autofocus systems or time-of-flight autofocus systems, or maybe...
Hey all, for those of you just hopping on, we're having a little bit of challenges here due to an incoming storm, but we're going to try and keep streaming and come back if anything drops. So, fingers crossed that it stays up this time. We'll see.
So let's get that out of the way.
Yeah, as some people were pointing out here, we just got rushed with all of that one-word comment. So yeah, now we've spoken about that, we're going to move on to some of the other really cool stuff, because there are so many questions in here that I think we really want to get to and get you guys answers for. One of the ones that I just saw here was from Aiden McNally, is asking, are the GH5 batteries compatible with the GH6, obviously? And Short answer, yes, they are. You can use BLF19 batteries in the GH6. However, there will be some limitations to what that battery is capable of powering
This
in
isn't
the GH6.
surprising
Many different
necessarily.
modes are going
We
to
do know that
require
battery
a
tech
newer
is advancing
battery,
really
the
fast.
LP22,
So
to be able to actually
a new
operate them.
battery
And
that provides more wattage and higher output
I think one of
isn't
the
surprising.
big points too is that, you know, all of these questions, we're going to give you the best answers we can as of right now for this first hour that this camera is live and known in the public. But over the next month, we're going to be doing a ton of streams here too. So, you know, we'll be answering a lot of these questions and showing more in-depth demonstrations than just the conversations here. But Matt, if there's anything you want to add in, just jump right in.
Really kind of interesting, some people's
Yeah, so let me
comments about
explain, a
how
little bit deeper on the
reliable
battery. So
AF as
it's
a
going to use
one-man
the
crew
Model 22 battery.
is
That'll come with the camera, obviously. It technically has a higher
undoable
voltage
with
threshold,
as
which means
manual.
lower power
Personally, in my
lower current going
experience,
into the camera,
I
a
don't
lower
trust
thermal threshold.
autofocus,
So
especially as a one-man
any
band,
recording modes
because I
that
need to be
cause the camera
making
to get
sure that it
hotter,
doesn't
like
fail while
4K
I'm looking at other
120,
things.
5.7K 60p, those aren't going to be available with the 19 battery. So I jokingly say, if you'd like to turn a
Okay, there's an
GH6
interesting
into
point.
a GH5, use the GH5's battery, and
So
that's about
just to
what
be
you're gonna
clear,
get out of the
they're
camera.
saying that
So,
the
keep in mind, those
5.7K
DR
and the
boost, dynamic range, they still work on
120 4K
the old
won't be
battery as well.
available
So
with
there's still
the
a lot you can do with the old
GH5
battery, but
batteries.
obviously you're going to get the most out of the camera with the new one.
Yeah. So let's see here. A couple other questions that came in. There were a lot of questions about the actual memory card layout with this camera and how things are going to work together. I know that reading, obviously, some of the chat questions here and some of the comments that we've seen in different locations online, there's some concerns about backup recording, relay recording, things that we've been doing in the GH line of camera for a long time.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting challenge.
But as the simple answer, we can say, most modes, as long as you're not having to use just the CF Express card because of the bitrate, you can still back up and relay record to both of those media devices.
Well, that'd be nice to hear, but it will be a fun challenge.
I want
let's
to
just
clarify
say
something on this too, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. So ProRes, it eats a lot of data. I don't think there's any question about that. It's like over 1900 megabits per second. That's got to go to the CF Express card.
Yeah, guys, let's be clear. That's not the 800 megabit mode. That's the 1.9 gigabit mode.
4K
so
60p, all intra at up to 600 megabits per second. That can go to both the CF Express card and a V90 card at the same time. So you're going to have opportunity, like 5.7K will be able to go to both cards. There's an option for 5.7K at 300 megabits per second that can go to both cards as well. So just be aware that you don't have to use ProRes, obviously, if you're a GH owner.
I'll just voice real quickly while they're talking. Personally, for me, for most of my projects, in truth, 150 megabit on the GH5 was enough. You really didn't see a breakdown of that, and that actually outperformed ProRes LT and up to ProRes regular 422. It actually outperformed it in color grading in post. It was only the 400 megabit that really... like, honestly, it was very rarely needed. Unless you had a lot of things in the frame, would you actually need that?
But at a minimum, you know you're going to have external media that you'll be able to work with the product as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking about that too, you know, some of the future stuff that's coming on, because we've gotten a lot of questions about future firmware updates, because I think as you have often said, Matt, it wouldn't be a Lumix launch if there wasn't firmware already planned for it. There will be support for things like RAW over HDMI coming in the future.
Okay, so we've got that confirmed.
SSD
we will have the RAW
over USB. Even
hey, everyone, we now know
with
recording to SSD,
ProRes, 422,
and ProRes RAW over HDMI.
5.7K 30p. That's what it ships at in 5.7K. Our firmware update that's going to be coming will supply DCI 4K, full HD options. And Matt, I think you have a little bit of insight as to the kind of the thought process behind that at launch.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think what people have to understand is that there's a lot of testing that has to happen whenever we put new codecs in. It's a lot of engineering time that has to go into this. So we wanted to
We're
make
just
sure we
trying
were
to put that
providing
into the
absolute
chat.
highest quality image from the camera that it was capable of achieving for ProRes. And then on top of that, as we go down the line, we'll be able to add in like 4K, you know, in a DCI format, and we'll also add full high definition. We have other things planned as well. I think what's most interesting to me about the firmware update is the reason why 4K 120
So I
didn't
think
make
the
it
lack of
for launch,
DCI
which
will be one
it's
limiting
kind of a
factor.
funny
I know for
story
me
because it takes
personally,
time to
having
test
that
these
out of the
things.
not having that
And
out of the box will be a bit of a pain in the
we
butt.
quickly figured out there are currently no recorders that support HDMI 2.1 at 4K 120 frames. So it didn't make any sense for us to make the investment.
Ooh, that might be an
having that
incorrect
ready,
statement
when
because
the
the
only thing you
new
could do is hook it up to
Atomos
your television or your
Ninja
computer monitor
V
and kind of
Yeah.
take selfies of
Plus,
yourself on the screen at
I believe
120
supports
frames per second.
2.1.
So that's one of the reasons why that's not going to be
I
in the
think our
camera
biggest
yet. It
challenge
just
on
didn't
this
make sense
will
to put the
always
time
be the
into it until
cables,
it's
though.
something that can record it. That's how forward-looking the camera really is. But then you also look at the
Hi
fact
all,
that
welcome
Atomos
to
is
the
using
chat
a
if you're not here
non-standardized
already.
124K for RAW, and so we are now working on making sure we can do 4K 120 over HDMI.
I'm
so
just
people can record the
commenting here
raw
to remind
output
everyone
to
coming in
an Atomos Ninja 5 Plus, which
some important
again
news
we're
that was kind of
looking
missed
to
out.
happen. So just be aware that we have a lot planned for this camera. If anybody remembers the history of the GH5, you know there's an awful lot of stuff running in the back of our heads that Sean and I can't even talk about right now about what we have planned for additions in the future.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to pull up another question here. It's from Sam Goose. Wants to know release date, raw output, which we just addressed, and then the photography side of this camera, something that I am really excited about with the GH6. But start with release date. Release date is going to be end of March, right? January, February. Yeah, March, next month.
Kind of an...
Man,
it's a month that starts with an M.
Yeah.
You got like M months. You got two shots. You got two shots out of Sean. So
yeah. So the camera will be shipping by next month, and I think probably one of the coolest things, Matt. Is the
well, I know I already have my pre-order in. How about you guys? Have you any of you guys already pre-ordered your camera?
Of promotion running for the pre-orders at the start of the camera's release. So if you take a look at least here in the United States, is the only one that I can speak of, at least because we're
the joys of being in Canada, unfortunately.
In the United States, when you pre-order the GH6, you're getting a free CF Express Type B card with the camera. So you're not having
to make sure I get that
to go get a CF Express card at the time that you buy the camera.
How big,
that's what
though,
I know,
is
at
an
least
interesting
in the US.
question.
Some other regions are also doing that promotion. Some other regions are doing maybe some different like cashback promotion, stuff like that. So take a look at your local store, wherever you're purchasing your camera equipment from. Double check, see what kind of promotions they've got going on there, because there's definitely something going on in the different regions across the globe. So knowing that CF Express is a newer format for a number of people out there, it's a really big
interesting. We'll talk on that in a little bit. There is an interesting solution I found to possibly use actual SSDs inside a CF Express Type B case form factor, since that's all they effectively are.
Well, and keep in mind that we obviously know our future roadmaps, so we're making sure we're giving away a card that is ready not just for what the camera can do today, but
this
what
is nice to hear
in the future for the product.
This is really nice to hear.
We're not gonna saddle you with a card that when we add something really cool, you won't be able to use it anymore. So trust me, it's plenty fast enough for anything we're doing in the future.
Yeah. And then also to the last part of the question from Sam was about the photography options. Obviously we're talking so much about the video side of this camera, and I don't think any of us can deny the GH6 is going to be loved and adopted by a vast majority of filmmakers and video content.
I think what's kind of interesting here, and I'll just say, so many people are coming into this with a YouTuber viewpoint instead of a filmmaker viewpoint, and I know personally a lot of people are saying they're very disappointed with the autofocus. I couldn't care less. It's very little that I'm going to use it. Very, very little. I would rather control my focus any day. And that's the nature both in documentary and in narrative. That's me, but I manually focus at f1.2. I'm fine with it. I'm used to it, and I don't find it that difficult.
And you're trying to go for that particular style, but as far as this new sensor and this processor, I have been floored by the noise level that this sensor doesn't produce, I guess is a way that I can word that. It's so clean. Yeah, it's so clean all the way up through the range, and the amount of detail that this sensor retains, and probably the best part, it's an actual sensor resolution increase in micro four thirds. We're up to 25 megapixels. You're not stuck at 20 megapixels anymore. And alongside that, you're still getting really fast burst rates for still shooting. You're getting up to 75 frames per second with a buffer that's about 200 shots in the buffer. So you're not going to only get less than a second worth of shooting and then have the camera have to clear the buffer out. You get a long time of shooting with it.
And more than 200 images that we're getting.
Very interesting to see. Apparently, we've already got Gerald Undone and DSLR Video Shooter. Both have reviews up with the new camera, so that's exciting.
In my opinion, is that the biggest gain
maybe talk about that after they've finished up here.
Going up, 20% resolution from 20 megapixels to 25 is a big increase. The dynamic range boost feature, I think, is going to be the part that really shocks some people at the image quality. And so I want to make sure everybody understands that DR boost is not just a video feature. It is a photographic feature as well.
Oh,
it is inherent within the sensor design. So just a very
an interesting point
of how this works. We capture a single frame of image information, and it's sent into two gain stages. You're going to have what we call a high gain stage, which will give us really clean shadows, but it's going to clip the highlights very quickly. So you're gaining up that image for clean shadows. And then we take a low gain stage, which has lots of dynamic range, more than a stop more. I mean, it's a one stop more dynamic range than any micro four thirds camera we've ever introduced.
Okay, so we're looking about a one-stop improvement. So if that's a one-stop improvement over anything they've made,
from the high gain stage, and we inject them into the noisy shadows of the low gain, and that creates a very high dynamic range image, but it has very clean shadows. And so that's the part that I'm really excited about, is how clean these files look when you process them. And Sean and I have been working within the Silky Pix app, which is the application that we can use right now for processing raw files. We're not just looking at the JPEG engine, which has huge improvements in terms of its noise reduction as well. We're seeing an incredibly clean image, things we've never seen in a micro four thirds camera. I think it would be safe to assume that this might be one of the best sensors available in crop sensor cameras. And so I think
that's
people are going to be blown away by that image quality.
We're going to have to see.
There's some limitations. This only works up to 60
because that includes
and that's in any video
the C300 Mark III and the C70, which are both
1080p. Doesn't matter. It's
crop sensor
60 frames to 60 frames. But this is also the case for photography. So you're going to see we have these two burst modes. We have a 60 frame burst, and we have a 75 frame burst. And a lot of you are probably going, why would Panasonic do this? There's like a 15 frame difference, and the buffer is basically the same. Why were you guys doing this? And it's pretty simple. 60 frames per second is the limit for DR boost, dynamic range boost. 75 frames per second is the throughput of the engine with all the other things that are going on with the autofocus system. So we can give you a maximum of 75 frames. That's going to be without DR boost. So that 60 frame is what gives you your DR boost function. And so for photographers, this is
just to quickly mention something that's being talked about in the chat over on the other side. We are seeing apparently that the HDMI board for it has been greatly improved. So we should see an improvement in HDMI latency, which would be a huge, huge improvement. That'll be nice to see.
And we're looking for noise in those frames that's moving, and that gives us the ability to cancel it out and clean up the image. And so you're going to get really clean video images from this camera, especially in the DR boost modes.
Yeah, it's such a cool technology. Actually, when we first started getting the materials so we could do trainings and stuff like that to get like even our own team up to speed on this, it's crazy how much stuff our engineers have packed into this, and I can tell you, for what it's worth, I mean, as everyone knows, this is a Lumix stream. We're both employees of Panasonic Lumix here in the US, but both of us are passionate photographers and videographers outside of this job. And this has been one of the most fun cameras I've legitimately been able to shoot with. You know, there's a reason why the 3 lenses I have tattooed on me are Micro Four Thirds lenses. Part of it's because we didn't have the S series out at the time. But a lot of it's that, you know, I get to go back to using my Nocticron. I get to use the 42.5 with it and actually shoot with a camera that, up until recently, you know, I loved shooting on the G9 when I would go back to my Micro Four Thirds cameras. This camera feels like
We're
the
already
perfect
seeing
mix of the
Zacuto
G9
dropping new cages for the
ergonomic-wise
camera.
and into the full,
Personally,
you know,
I'm
GH
excited
series
to
evolving features.
see
I
a
don't have to
continuation
worry
of
about which camera I want to take
small
anymore.
rigs.
It is
I'm going to
such an
definitely be
amazing
testing to see
stills
if
camera.
my old one
And
fits.
probably the coolest thing, which we didn't
but
really
we will
talk
see.
about too much in the launch, it has the S1H style rear screen on it. So we can flip it out, have tilt. So
Yeah,
all
the
of you that love
S1H
tilt
screen
screens,
is
you've
so
got a tilt
nice.
screen. And everyone that likes vari-angle screens, you got a vari-angle screen. And then now it doesn't actually get in the way of any of the ports on the side. It's just so much fun to use. I'm so excited.
Well, and I noticed some venting on the side of it. I'm sure that's created
Yes.
probably a little bit of controversy as well. So
Yes, it has.
yes, there's vents. There's vents on the side. There's a fan internally, and so I know that there's some questions about weather resistance when it comes to the fan. So I think
let's
it's
hear
important
on
to
this.
understand
This
that
is
what we
important.
formed is a
But
plenum.
we see the
It's a
S1H
tube,
had this.
basically, where the fan resides, and there's a heat sink that's pulling heat, and the heat's actually coming out. The fan is cooling the sensor. I'm sorry, no, the fan is cooling the engine, and the fan is cooling the CF Express card.
Yeah,
The
the
chassis of the camera
cards
is actually
run
cooling
crazy
the
hot.
sensor.
If
So
any of you
there's
have
a
shot with
separate
CF Express before,
passive cooling for sensor. It's active
it's
cooling for engine and CF Express card. That whole case where your camera's guts live is completely sealed away from the fan. So there's no way water.
Wait a minute. Is it
Unless you
CF Express
if you
or is it
submerge the thing, that
CFast?
would be a problem. But if you got rain, snow, things like that that are, you know, not ridiculous downpours, you shouldn't have any issues.
We should double check this.
Also keep in mind the LCD screen is a sealed system as well. So it's just the plenum. And then I realize there's some questions about the fan's reliability and durability. You know, in truth, the S1H has a fan-based cooling system. The box cameras, both the BGH1 and the BS1H, have fan-based cooling systems. These are coreless motor designs, so they don't have they don't have like an iron core that has copper wiring wrapped around it. It's effectively a magnet field that's floating and spinning. It's like a maglev train for a fan. That's effectively what's in there. So it is a weatherproofed device as well. So you're effectively building a camera system that is completely weather sealed, and then you're attaching a fan to the back of it in order to get that heat out of the engine and out of the CF Express card. So I wouldn't worry too much about the reliability of the fan system in the camera. Frankly,
yeah, guys, generally I would say the fan I wouldn't be too worried about.
For water incursion in any camera is where the lens
I've used
the mount.
A fan with my BGH1 setup here. I've had no issues, so I wouldn't be too worried about it.
Safe. That's a big hole inside your camera, so that should be your bigger concern. And every camera has the same kind of mount structure with their bayonets, so don't worry about the fan. That's the least likely area you're going to get water incursion or problems.
Yeah. So I want to have a couple of comments here to respond to a couple of the comments that had been coming in here. So, you know, obviously, as we said, cooling fan. One of the things that I think a lot of people may miss, at least here with
I'll be right back on screen because I'm just trying to double check something.
We've had a camera on the market that supports and utilizes a cooling system for an active cooling system. It's the S1H.
Since 2019.
That camera, since 2019. So this isn't new. This isn't new technology for us to be developing. Its reliability isn't in question. I think if you are concerned about reliability, look at reviews of the S1H. You know, that camera's been out almost 2 years now at this point, and the camera is just rock solid. This is going to be the same thing. Yeah, it's just such an awesome piece of kit. The other cool thing is that there are people asking questions about noise, fan noise, things like that.
Fan noise for the BGH1, not a big deal. It's very quiet.
You have to remember that you're not
truthfully have mine cranked to full all the time.
That, say, your home box fan would run, or your home air conditioning fan would run, which run at fast RPMs to create a ton of noise because they have to move a whole bunch of air. These systems run much slower, so they're a lot quieter. Vibration is dampened properly because of the type of fan that's being used, as Matt described. And on top of it, the system has a number of modes so that you can tune it more for your style of shooting. If you're in an environment where it's going to be ridiculously hot out,
have you pre-ordered yet?
I'm in Texas here. You're out in Denver. We get some pretty hot summers in both the areas, depending on where you are. You have the ability to turn the fan on to full speed if you need it. But you also have the ability to leave it in Auto 2, which is how the camera ships, which will automatically turn the fan off when it doesn't need it. So it's only going to ever kick the fan on when it's absolutely necessary, and you have different speeds for it. So as far as audio goes...
Honestly, the different speeds, it's almost not even considerable. It's not important.
If you're using the internal microphones, is going to have a really hard time picking it up, especially if you're recording anywhere that's going to have any kind of normal sound running. Yeah, it's mind-boggling how cool the system is.
Welcome to the few people that have jumped on to the video.
Let's see here.
So,
go ahead.
I've seen a couple questions about the high-res shot mode and the handheld high-res mode. I've also seen some questions about certain features like live view composite. As of today, the GH6 has no live view composite. And Sean and I don't know if they're going to be adding it to the camera or not. The high-res shot mode is a very cool addition because the stabilization system in this camera has improved radically over the GH5 and even the GH5 Mark II. It's not just that it's 7.5 stops more, more stable. I'm sorry, it's 7.5 stops of stability versus 6.5 stops on the 5 Mark II. There's a much higher precision gyro sensor in this camera, and it gives us better data for stabilizing everything. And so wide angle lenses for video look awesome on the camera with the stabilization system. And that stabilization system helps us to be able to...
I think the interesting point on this is a lot of people were complaining about the stabilization on Canon, and then Canon used the excuse that it's not good and to remove it. That hasn't ever been the case, I found, with the GH5. It's a wide angle, almost YouTuber-made issue, I would argue. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about that on this if anyone's considering that.
It's actually smart enough to recognize the movement of those cars, and it auto-corrects it and gives you the look of a longer exposure for those cars that were moving. Or if they were high, fast shutter speed, it effectively just picks one sample and gives you the single sample for anything that was moving in the in the image. It's really good, and I think a lot of people are going to be impressed with that feature.
Yeah, that's probably one of the coolest things. Obviously we've had high resolution shot mode before, and handheld high resolution isn't necessarily a new thing, and we're not claiming that we're the first to be the ones to do this. However, you now have a camera that has natively higher resolution than any other Micro Four Thirds camera on the market, and you have a handheld high resolution shot.
Okay, we got to give them a little bit of temper that a little bit. We have to remember that Micro Four Thirds has been stuck at 20 megapixels for the last 6-7 years, I feel like. I might be wrong on that, but it's at least 5 from the time the GH5 came out. 25 is an improvement. It's not a massive leap, but especially when we're seeing that on 1-inch sensors. But having the high-res mode that can shoot photos handheld with computational photography, that is an improvement. So let's not ignore that, but temper that big improvement a little bit.
And as Matt said, things like live view composite, it'd be cool, but we just don't know at this time, what's coming. The live streaming stuff as well. I heard you mention that. I wasn't purposely not listening to you. I was trying to read through the chat. But
great to know we're getting the live streaming functionality of like the GH1 and the GH5 II. This is a really cool feature. I'm not using it right now here, for those wondering. This camera obviously is behind me, but I'm personally using actually my iPhone at the moment, actually over NDI for this stream. It was a little bit easier to set up, and I wanted to have the cameras behind me. So.
And you can obviously charge right at the charger, or you can plug the camera in to the USB-C and into that wall adapter, and you can charge it that way as well. It's important to note that that wall adapter we give you, if you turn on the camera to use it, it's going to stop charging the battery, but then it'll just power the camera off the wall adapter. If you want to be able to
Okay, very interesting to know.
at the same time you're powering it, you'll need a different wall adapter. We make, I think it's the BTC15 that can be purchased. That's our official adapter. But realistically, we can't guarantee every USB device, but if they're being honest and it's 9 volts and 3 amps and it has that rating on the device.
Okay, so that's good to know. So we now know that, let's put that into the chat here, but we know now that it uses 9 volt 3 amp output for USB PD.
Power and charge the battery at the exact same time with the GH6. And then obviously, as we mentioned earlier, eventually that USB output will let you record to external drives as well. So I saw that question that had come up, and I wanted to make sure we got that out of the way.
Yeah. So going through a couple of the kind of generals that have gone through here. So everybody knows, the GH6 is basically, for all intent and purpose, from the video side, a 10-bit camera. You have to dig very, very deep to find 8-bit codecs.
Okay, that's nice to hear too.
You can't do, just so you know, you can't do slow-mo. You can't do slow-mo with the 8-bit codecs. The VFR does not work in any of the 8-bit codecs. So,
and
that's interesting to hear.
One of the things I think for a lot of people too is
VFR
that,
in 10-bit.
VFR now in this camera, while you don't have continuous autofocus, you have push AF at the beginning of it, and you don't have sound, but you have a 10-bit codec now that's actually fairly robust to work with. The high frame rate options, 48 frame native in this camera, 120 native in this camera, and 240 native in this camera, all in 10-bit options, all with varying levels of high bit rate, lower bit rate. This camera is probably one of the biggest jumps forward when it comes to how you can actually use this footage in this camera. And with our system, you still get tracking AF up to 120 frames per second with this camera. So 4K 120, 1080 120, you can go up to the 300 frames per second in the variable frame rate. You don't get autofocus with that.
Okay, so
you've got
we know then the autofocus system is working at less than 300 frames per second if they can't use it for that, just as a reference. Probably 120 then, or 240. So they're doing tracking at double the frame rate. That would be pretty normal.
When you're in the high frame rate mode. But even up to 240 frames per second, you can still press the AF on button on the back of the camera.
There you go. It's using 240.
And have the camera readjust focus in real time. So
that's answering that right there.
Camera as well. So just be aware that now there are going to be some caveats there. It's not every lens is going to be able to do that. It's going to be a select list of lenses. It's all listed on our site. And then if you're in a PAL region, you want to shoot 200 frames because you're delivering 50 frame, you'll need to do firmware updates to your lenses to make the 200 frame autofocus work. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. And actually on that point too, just so that, because I see a couple people asking the same question, Hfr modes in the GH6. So 120, or let's start at the bottom. 48 frame per second, 60, 120, and 240 that are selectable in the main recording options all have autofocus and all have audio recording. Variable frame rate, which is how you get to 300 frames per second, doesn't have audio or autofocus. So you still get your audio in the HFR functions for this camera. So it's a big jump up. So let's see here.
Is there a headphone? I heard, is there a headphone jack? No, we were, yeah, I'm joking. Yes, it absolutely is.
Wow, they were doing a troll there.
I realize not everybody here is a Panasonic owner, so it's not something that they're aware of. So I probably shouldn't be so
yes, that's an important question.
Yeah, it absolutely has a headphone jack, has a microphone jack, and we make a device called an XLR1, which you can put through the hot shoe of the camera.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. They are not changing the XLR module. It's going to use the same one as the GH5, GH5 II, GH5S, BGH1, S1H, and BS1H.
Simultaneously. So, companies like Saramonic and Rode, they make little, wireless lav systems that give you 2 transmitters, one for each of your interviewees, and then you can put that onto the 3.5. That gives you 2 different level controls for those people, and then you can use, you know, dedicated XLR microphones and use those as your, you know, person 3 and person 4. Some people like to double lav individuals so that they, in case there's a scratch that's happening on
Sometimes
shirt,
we use
they
that.
can literally double lav people and use
It's not necessarily for scratching sounds. That is actually more for failures
it's a
or
very
issues. That's why
useful
you
set of
often
features
see
to have in a
2
camera.
mics sitting side by side on
By the
like
way,
some
one
newscasters.
addition to the camera that I love that, you know, Sean, I know you have one there. You should show them the audio button. It is such a simple. Once you use this camera, you're gonna be wide in every camera manufacturer to do this. It's a simple button that's on the top of the camera.
Hang on. I'm actually. Let me see if I can plug,
we have confirmation. They're including the 10 custom slots that we have on the BGH1. Massively useful, guys. If you've not used them on the BGH1, it's huge.
The settings of the camera
so
for
useful.
the audio, so you can see all 4 levels going. You can make adjustments to everything in real time. It is a very nice addition to the camera, and frankly, I'm shocked we didn't add a button years ago that takes you straight to the audio settings, because it's incredibly useful on the product.
Yeah, so you'll see here this little new button up here. When you press this, the back of the camera now gets you this display. Hold it straight.
Yeah, and
that lets
and
you
right now
see
you're just showing 2
settings.
channels. Yeah, and right now you only show 2 because you don't have the XLR one attached.
This is huge. Oh, this is huge.
Press the audio button again.
And then now you've got all 4 channels.
This, guys, this.
So I think
it's
that this
so
is
needed.
This feature.
Yeah. Couple of the other questions that came here. It does support timecode, just like the GH5 does. So you have a cable that comes in the camera that plugs into the port on the front.
And Team Rocket, it absolutely has double card slots. It has a CF Express and it has an SD card slot.
Yep.
And for the vast majority of the codecs, it will record to both simultaneous, as long as your data rate is 800 megabits. It's under 800 megabits. So effectively 600 and under. You can absolutely do backup recording.
Yeah, Genlock would be nice.
So I got 2 things that I want to address right away. Because I see a lot. The Shannon has been asking a number of times. I apologize, we haven't gotten to your question yet. 4K crops. There are no crops in this camera. Everything that you can record, save for 4.4K at 60p, which is the 4:3 aspect ratio, will be full sensor width. So you're not going to have to worry about that area. You do have the ability to... Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, no, finish. I'm interrupting you. I apologize.
So when you have 4.4K, which will get you 60 and 48 frames per second, that will be a slightly crop in on the sensor, but things like 5.7K, 4K, all the way up to 60.
Oh no, the 48 has a crop?
300 frames per second will use the full sensor width for recording. You do have the ability to go in and change image area of recording to pixel if you want more reach. At the downside of no longer using the full sensor to create that resolution that you're outputting at. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in this camera.
Well, and Sean, something I want to point out, it's not just that we have an uncropped image for everything, even up to 120 frames per second. What I think is important to note is that the sensor itself actually can read out 5.7K at 120 frames per second.
Wait.
We just don't have the processing power internally or the thermal management to be able to handle
that's saying something.
Or probably ever in this particular chassis. I don't want anybody thinking that's coming in a firmware update. Just don't spread that rumor. That's not the case. But because of this, that means that when you look at 4K 120, it's downsampled from 5.7K 120. So it looks stunningly
good. This is interesting.
On top of that,
it's a scaled down
really
120.
fast readout speed.
That's huge.
When we go down to 1080, 240, it's a simple binning of the sensor. You're not having to do a lot of line skipping. So the 1080 240 looks really good on this camera as well. And even the 300 frame has a really nice look. This is the best looking like high frame rates of 240 and 300 frames I've ever seen in our cameras. Obviously, we've never had 300 before, but the 300 looks better to my eye than the 180 frame looked on the GH5. And so it's really excellent. And all these frame rates, these high frame rates outperform the GH5 hands down. So I think people are going to really be impressed with that. Plus, it's 10-bit at 10-bit 422 at 240 frames per second, which is amazing that you can do that. And it's a no time limit recording option, which is nuts. I mean, if you're working with an editor, they're going to walk off the job, because if you record 1 hour's worth of full high definition at 300 frames per second, you're going to end up delivering 12 and a half hours worth of video content if it's going on a 24 frame timeline. So that's the kind of recording, that's the kind of durability.
Good to know. So we have linear focus pulls available.
Yeah, and let's see here. Some of the other questions that I saw came up here. Full-size HDMI port, as would be expected in the Lumix cameras for like the GH.
We got a question. We got a question. Can we record vlog in ProRes? Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
vlog
that's going to be expected.
They go together like I don't know, ketchup and mustard. Peanut butter and jelly, spaghetti and meatballs.
Nice. So 5.8K anamorphic.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Oh yes, this was the other question I wanted to get to. Tip 2 Frog was, can audio input be adjusted below -12 decibels? Yes, it can. It can be adjusted to -18 decibels, as well as the audio in the camera can be set to mute. So you do have the ability to just totally disable all the internal audio input with the video file. So you do have that option.
We also have the 2 gain settings too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yep. Basically, it's the same kind of audio system that you see with the S1H. So, however,
only better.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, only better. Matt, you want to let them know why?
Well, obviously, you can now record 24-bit 48 kilohertz audio to the internal microphones. I know all of
That's
you were
huge.
just clamoring for that.
I mean, the internal mics never used.
Actually,
but the 3.5 mil jack 24-bit is nice.
Record 96 kilohertz 24-bit audio. So you're getting the same resolution of audio that you'd get through the XLR1. It's not quite as clean or have as clean an analog stage, but it's the same resolution. So you're going to get pretty close matching, especially if you use the right microphone on that 3.5.
Yeah. Let's see here. H265.
Are we looking into 32-bit? Are we looking into 32-bit float at this time? No, that won't be in the GH6.
Yeah, that wasn't a surprise and not huge.
H265 codec. So easy way to tell with the Lumix cameras, at least, is anything that's 420 10-bit is going to be an HEVC or a H.265 compression. Anything 422 10-bit is H.264. So you have plenty of options both ways.
And there's a reason we do 420 10-bit. I know some people want an HEVC codec that's 422.
Everyone, just so you know, 422 you really don't need unless
the transcode.
Unless you do green screen.
That's possible with a 422 10-bit HEVC file.
Let's be honest, it's not necessarily always needed.
And any media cards or GPUs that we can find that can accelerate HEVC 422 10-bit. It just doesn't exist. So
that's a bit of a lie. Certainly the 3080 Ti in my system here, it can easily do it. But let's be clear, it's a it's a $2,500 card. It's as much as the camera.
Without any real issues. So that's why we chose to do that. Keep in mind that we have a 5.7K 60p option that is HEVC. So that could be a real challenge to edit unless you transcoded that footage. So that's why we're working with 420.
Yeah. Let's see here. One of the other questions was, can you punch in for focus when you're can you manually punch in for focus while you're recording? I don't know, Matt. Do you want to break it to them?
Oh no. Probably doesn't.
This is your thing.
So, we've listened, and yes, of course you can with the new sensor.
Hey!
The new sensor and the new processor allows us that ability that you can do manual focus.
Oh, perfect.
Punch in while you're recording video. It's been a long time coming. I know a lot of people have asked us for this. It's now with the new engine and sensor. It's now capable to be done with the GH6. So. Yes.
And Sean and I have a policy on this channel. We try to be honest, or we will be honest with you. So there's a caveat. That'll only work up to 60 frames per second. So once we get to 120 frames per second, we won't be able to do the focus assist or the magnification once you're above 4K 60 or 1080 60 for that matter. But I just want to make sure we got that out there because I don't want a bunch of people on the forum saying, Panasonic lied to me about this. This is a limitation.
Yeah. So, let's see here. We got time probably for like a couple more questions.
Well, there's one I want to make sure I get to because
Yeah.
Fabian has been asking quite a bit, and I want to make sure we get this out of the way because if I don't, I won't be able to sleep at night.
An important, very huge thing to
note. A lot of
note.
requests for B-RAW. So we offer B-RAW on some of our cameras over HDMI to be able to use with external recorders. At this time, we haven't made any public announcements about what we're doing with B-RAW. Or if we'll support
Open gate anamorphic.
That's being asked multiple times. Some people are asking about B-RAW internal. I saw that on here as well. Keep in mind that, not everything.
Sorry, I'm trying to do a lot of things at once here.
There are times where people
Let's hear what they're saying, and I'll then address it.
They may not feel comfortable sharing, or we may not have a certain function in the camera that would be required to make that specific thing you want work. Sean and I are not the engineers of the product. We don't know what the limitations are for adding B-RAW into a camera. Those decisions happen in Japan. I can tell you right now, there are no plans for B-RAW internal, and they have not told us if there's any plans for B-RAW external over HDMI. So I just want to get that out of the way. Yeah. I didn't want Fabian thinking we were ignoring him on that.
See here. If anyone's looking for sample video footage of the camera, we're not going to live stream it here or anything like that because live streaming kills the quality of the footage anyway. So it's not going to tell you anything. There's plenty of videos out there right now. You can take a look at our page over on the global page, and there will be sample footage up there, so you guys will be able to take a look at it without having gone through, kind of the YouTube compression. So, let's see here. Vlog is Vlog V-Gamut.
Yeah, it's the full Vlog. It's not Vlog L. So, not that ultimately. I think that was a bigger deal than people made it out to be. This Vlog is always about how much highlight information the sensor has. We set a rule that we call it Vlog L when it's under a certain dynamic range. The GH6 now exceeds that dynamic range threshold, so it made perfect sense to make it a full Vlog camera. But that's more about sensor characteristics.
The huge thing that I'll just point out here that I was writing about before was that the 5.8K open gate anamorphic does support HDMI out still working, unlike the 6K
Actually, I want
previous.
To get one last thing. So 6K photo mode. So yes, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Panasonic introduced 6K and 4K photo modes. And these modes were intended to provide high frame rate capture options for photography, using video and allowing to pull still frames out of it. In 4K photo, it was like an 8 megapixel file. On the GH5, 6K photo was not 6K. It was the density of a 6K file. It was a 5.2K capture. Because now the camera can record in all these video modes in 10-bit internally, you don't put it into a 6K mode or a 4K mode anymore. Just record in the 4:3 aspect ratio, 4.7K, and you're going to effectively get exactly what you would have gotten with the 6K photo mode. Bar a few, slight changes in some features we had to offer. So we've elected to just make it a video mode, and you can record it that way, and you can still extract the frames just like you were always able to from the 6K and 4K photo mode.
Yeah. So cool. All right. That's, I think, where we're going to call it tonight. Everyone, if you want to continue these conversations, I hope that you join us on Lumix Live this Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We do these broadcasts of forums like this every single week. So we will definitely be continuing this conversation on Thursday. Outside of that, thank you all so much for joining us. We're sorry we didn't get to every single one of your questions, but obviously there is a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions, that's for sure.
Thank you, Matt, for joining us today, for joining me today. Yeah, I think that's...
Well, they kind of cut it off early. So let's bring it over maybe to here for the moment. Just disable that for a bit. So I think the big news that we are figuring out here, this addresses the GH6, so many things that I was asking for in the GH5. We know now that we are getting higher resolution, 5.7K. We are getting it in 60 frames per second. We are additionally getting almost everything in 10-bit mode with ProRes HQ as an ultimate top-tier option, but that's only going to be to the CF Express card, which is understandable. If any of you have worked with ProRes 422 HQ, you'll know it's crazy large. We're talking right now that that's going to be using 5.9 gigabit per second to the CF Express card. But every mode, it sounds like, below that, which is up to the 800 megabit all-I codec, which the 5.7 is shooting at, will shoot to the SD card with a proper V90 SD. That is massive, and it's going to be fabulous for use. I think 800 megabit is probably, in truth, almost over the top for most people's needs. I would expect for, even in 5.7K for most people, in my experience, as a colorist, I've truthfully found that even the 150 megabit internal in the GH5 stands up better in most color environments than ProRes 422 LT, certainly. It easily equals 422 regular. So if we have an 800 megabit internal, for most people, unless your post house is asking for ProRes, the 600 or 800 megabit mode is going to be so beyond what you need, it will be just fine. So that's massive. The other big thing that we now know, we have full proper anamorphic again in full sensor readout. So that is an open gate 4/3 sensor, which, for those of you that don't realize, that height actually matches what a 16 by 9 Super 35 sensor would have in terms of actual vertical sensor height. This is kind of something that is often misunderstood by, I find, a lot of people, that they think the Micro 4/3 is going to automatically be smaller and anamorphic, and it would be better to go up to a Super 35 sensor, something like the Red Komodo or any of the Sony Super 35s, which aren't as big a deal now. But a Red Komodo is a 16 by 9 sensor. So your actual sensor height in the Red Komodo, when shooting anamorphic, will be very similar to the GH6 will have. If you then use a speed booster, well, then we're talking actually full frame height equivalent with an ultra speed booster. I've done this math a few times when I've been talking to people. But a Micro 4/3 sensor speed boosted on an ultra speed booster, so that's a 0.71 times speed booster, you actually get the same vertical sensor height as a full frame Sony camera shooting in 16 by 9. And that's simply because 16 by 9 crops in on the sensor so much that you're effectively getting the same height as Super 35 would on a full sensor open gate readout. So just kind of an interesting thing to note. And then the other big news, because the GH5, this was one of the huge, unfortunate limiting factors, what they called its, I believe, 6K anamorphic mode. The 6K anamorphic mode is now properly shooting with the full resolution and outputting over HDMI. This was one of the huge drawbacks of the GH5's anamorphic mode. We could use the smaller resolution anamorphic and output it so that we could monitor, but you couldn't use the full resolution anamorphic mode and output over HDMI, which effectively made it unusable. There's no rig that I would set up that I could watch the back and shoot anamorphic, or look through the viewfinder and shoot anamorphic. So that change is massive. That's a huge one. Now, we do know, also really importantly, that ProRes RAW won't be there to start, but it will be coming in a future firmware update. So they're doing the same kind of idea that they did with the GH5 and the firmware roadmap. Now, we do have to remember that you should never buy a camera based on what is promised in future firmware. However, I would note that for the GH5 and for Lumix in general, they have almost, I honestly can't think of an instance where they didn't follow through on their firmware promises. So I'd be tempted to trust them on that, but I still say don't buy a camera based on what they promise in future. Only buy based on what it has now today. But longer term, we are talking ProRes RAW over HDMI. We are talking SSD over USB recording as a potential future. They're saying that's going to happen. So that's huge. That would be very nice. And beyond that, yeah, the one other thing, we do know that the higher resolution modes, something like the 5.7K 60 and the 4K 120, both have audio, which is nice, but they won't work on the original I believe it's BFG 19 battery. You'll need the new 22, which it comes with. So just to kind of note, you'll be able to use your old GH5 batteries, but don't expect to get the high resolution modes with them. This isn't them trying to make it impossible. It's the same idea as the new Canon batteries. Simple fact is battery tech has improved, energy density is improved. We can assume if we look at the drone market that what is called the C rating of the battery, which is how much amperage can be pulled out of the battery at a given time, that is going to be so much, it's so much higher as we've progressed in battery tech. So this isn't surprising that the new batteries can power the camera in modes that the old ones won't be able to. Let's see, the one other thing that we also know, it now properly does power over USB, so if you want to run the internal new battery and power over USB power delivery, we can do that. We also now know what the power delivery spec is over USB, and that will be 9 volt 3 amp. So it doesn't need the full 20 volt. We are seeing the 9 volt mode. So that gives us an idea that now we know that that won't charge the camera. That will only run the camera if you're recording with it plugged in. So you would want a full battery, but it will keep it going effectively and provide you uninterruptible power, which is nice. Just looking at that there, that means that we're getting 27 watts of power. So that gives you an idea that how much power this camera is going to suck down when it's actually running in max performance mode, like in its higher bit rates, which means it's pulling down 27 watts of power. So to give you a sense, if you're running a setup, for example, I'll give you guys a little tour while we're now done. But if, for example, you're running a rig like mine, this is basically what the GH6 is going to replace. This is my GH5 rig. Yes, very over the top. And in this case, I'm running a 98 watt V-mount. That would tell us that we are going to get, somewhere in the range of about 3 hours off a V-mount before any other power is being drawn. So that's an interesting point. I think those are kind of the key points that stuck out for me. For the few of you that are on the stream still, what are your thoughts? Do you have any questions that weren't answered in the live stream? Do you guys have anything that is a real standout feature for you? And we'll see how long that takes, because that takes usually a minute for you guys to see the stream. But beyond this, I think we're getting a camera, the GH6, that really is going to be an incredible replacement for the GH5. I know personally my pre-order went in today. I'm really excited for just addressing a lot of the little things that I've been wanting changed in the camera, that I've been wanting to that just kind of allowed me not to, or to have to find solutions. Things like the anamorphic mode. I use that a lot, not for anamorphics, but for social media videos when I need to do multi-aspect recording. So if I'm delivering something that they might use in square format or vertical video format, it's nice to have that flexibility. And now with the higher resolution, that will allow us to have a proper full tall frame. So that's going to be huge for me. The 4 channels of audio, I've actually been specifically using the Ninja V files. Usually I try and use that as a backup recording, but lately I've been using it a lot to give me my 2 channels of lav mic audio in addition to my onboard XLR mic and also the wireless XLR system that I have on board. Having those 2 channels recording internally to the internal files, I would rather that. I personally don't need ProRes for my regular work, but ProRes for certain clients and not having to transcode is always nice. So doing that internally would be really nice. That means we can get ProRes without attaching an Atomos in small rigs, which is really nice. Not small rig the brand, but in terms of small rigging of the camera. I think it's a really exciting release. There's a lot of little things that are being addressed. 24-bit without having to use the external audio module, that is fabulous. And 24-bit from the 3.5 millimeter jack, that is also massive. It's actually one of the reasons that I've been personally using the pre-recorded or the backup recording files in my Rode units, because they tend to be actually they're 24-bit, so it gives a little bit more resolution on the audio files. Honestly, this is a huge camera. I'm very excited for this. With that, if you guys don't have any other thoughts, I think we'll call it a stream here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Sorry for the little bit of connection issues we had at the beginning. It was unfortunate that we had some internet dropouts, but sometimes that is the issue, especially if I'm not trying to back up the stream. We'll know that for next time. But wanted to try things out here, so this is what we get. Anyways, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Sean Coulton with Coulton Photography and Coulton Studios. Love that you joined me here. If you guys have any further questions, please go ahead and drop them into the comments below, and I will see what I can do to answer them as once this video is up and rewatchable. So thank you everyone. Enjoy your evening and get in those pre-orders. Cameras are apparently shipping middle of March, so fingers crossed it's sighted. All right, everyone. Thank you. Have an amazing evening and take care.